Good afternoon. Welcome to the meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Education for the budget. If you'd please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Good afternoon. And this is just the presentation and review of the budget.
Yes, ma'am.
And so to speed things along, what I would like to do is I'll make a note of any questions that we have, and then we can address them later if we don't have the information to address them now.
Okay, that sounds great.
Does that
Thank
work?
you. Yes. Okay. Well, good afternoon. Dr. Gibson is not able to be with us today, so I'll be filling in along with the folks that are in the audience who are here to help with the presentation today. Also wanted to let you know that the weather is not cooperating, so hopefully that stays good out there. We're a little bit worried about a tornado watch that we had seen a little earlier. So want to make sure that all of our students get home safely on our buses. All right, so the annual budget for Jefferson County Schools has always been primarily devoted to our staff. This year, that has intensified as we work to recruit and retain the staff necessary to support the changing needs of our children. Today, we will provide a brief review of the current challenges, mandates, and opportunities in our environment that guided the decision making. Included in this are the following: significant social skill deficits and maladaptive behaviors of children resulting from COVID-induced isolation. Learning lags across grade levels from reduced exposure to direct instruction during COVID. Significantly increased truancy rates compared to pre-COVID, which is perpetuating and increasing the behavior and academic issues noted before. Retention and recruitment priority with focus with previous financial commitments made by the Jefferson County Board of Education. Concerns regarding the consistency and quality of school instruction and the mental health of staff affected by persistent staffing shortages. A high volume of long-term substitutes, especially in hard-to-fill areas such as special education. Inflationary pressures on infrastructure and operational costs. That includes bond projects and our ongoing operational expenses such as diesel for transportation. Increase in educational model options for parents, such as JVA and other options like charter school. Shift in special education high needs population with higher percentage of students with autism and other service intensive disabilities. On the table there are several handouts, and we will direct you to those as we move through our presentation. I think one of the things that you will notice during the presentation is that many of the things listed are needs. We haven't really been to the place where we get to the programs that we would like to offer or need, or beyond the curriculum that we have offering in Jefferson County. And a lot of those needs are based strictly on numbers, whether it be student enrollment, whether it be course requests that students have asked for different classes, and you'll note that throughout. So we will start off by asking Katie Russell, our Chief Financial Officer, and she's going to show you the proposed draft budget. Katie?
Good afternoon. I just want to start by going over an overview of the proposed budget, as well as many of the individuals here will be speaking on their parts coming up. First, I want to just briefly go over our different funds that we have. I'm going to spend most of my time on Fund 11. That's our general expense fund, and that is about 60% of all funds. So Fund 21, that is used for payments of principal and interest. And Fund 21 accounts for the J.C. Building Commission lease, and that has a maturity date of June of 2030. Fund 31, this is the fund related to our bond construction, and has a maturity date of June of 2036. Fund 51, this is used to account for all acquisition of capital expenditures by the board. Currently, the total of this fund is at $20.2 million. You can see the breakdown outlined here. Fund 61 is used to account for specific revenue sources that are legally restricted to specific purposes. There are various small accounts in this fund, but I wanted to point out the digital one-to-one. My understanding is that this has been a big priority for the board, and a significant of funds have been assigned to this project. We still have a strong balance at 2.9, and we can continue this initiative over the next fiscal year. Fund 71, these are our CARES Act funding. For next fiscal year, ARP, the American Rescue Plan. Funding is the last of the CARES Act that we have left. In this budget, there's 27 staff members funded through this portion and fund. So now, Fund 11, it's the general operating fund. All revenue and expenditures except those mentioned previously run through here. Our proposed general fund expense for FY23 is budgeted at $111,525,164. I want to spend just a few minutes going through the revenue pieces. As you can see on this chart in comparison to last fiscal year, our main increase in revenue this year is in our local funds, which we discussed at the levy presentation in March. State sources have remained relatively stable. Projected Medicaid remains the same. Revenue from miscellaneous sources, we are projecting a decrease in table referendum funds. As many of you are aware, we've been monitoring this over the last few years due to COVID, the continued rebound from COVID, and the opening of the casino at the National Harbor. We're keeping very close tabs on it, and we felt that this was the year we needed to decrease it some so that we can make sure that we can cover all of our expenses. Looking at this year's revenue and projecting for next year, it also includes $1 million in board designated funds and carryover sitting at $1.5 million currently. That's a 7% increase overall. I really want to talk about salaries and benefits because they continue to be our largest expense at 80% of the total budget. As you can see, salary and benefits costs have increased by $5.1 million. This is due to the state 5% raise that was passed, in addition to the proposed staff positions that you'll hear about in a little bit. The recruitment and retention expenses are what is wrapped up in all of this. Our benefit costs have remained relatively stable for next fiscal year. Next, I just want to take a quick look at our non-salary expenditures. Non-salary expenses are budgeted at $20.8 million. This is an increase of about 8% overall, which is pretty standard compared to what we are seeing throughout the economy to date. Some areas increase slightly higher than 8%, and that's usually related to our oil, gas, diesel, and those kind of expenses. And again, this is just a overview, and everybody else is going to talk a little bit more specifically about their portions. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, I have questions.
Sure.
For the one-to-one, first of all, appreciate you being here. It's helpful if you came sometimes to the meetings, because whenever I have questions, nobody has the answers, and I never hear back.
Sure. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So the one-to-one initiative is, is this the same every year? Are you projecting this because it was the previous amount?
Yeah, so it began with $2 million, and then you guys added another $2.5 million. And of course, it's been used throughout the year to purchase hardware for students and staff. It's your technology expenses, mostly hardware for your technology. And so what you are currently seeing is what our fund balance sits right now.
This is what you have available, that's what you're saying?
And what will be carried over, yes. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, so you're not saying that you expect it to cost that much?
Oh, no. No, sorry. Nope. That's what we have available, so we will have funds to continue with this initiative moving forward next year.
I don't know if this is the time to ask about other questions in here, so I don't know. I guess I can wait, but
Yeah, it could be covered in some of the other pieces, but I'd be happy to come back around to it if it's not.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
All right, the next section of our agenda is part of the draft budget. Staff here are going to provide an overview of the proposed program and staffing changes. The first item on there, as you know, we've been very fortunate in West Virginia to receive a 5% teacher and service personnel raise, which is well beyond deserved. I just want to remind everyone that according to the state's funding formula, any positions that are outside of that Jefferson County employs, then we have the obligation of providing that 5% raise for those positions outside the formula. So there is an expenditure that is that Jefferson County takes on too when those raises are put in place.
So, Mr. Banks, I just want to make sure everybody understands. So when the state gives a raise,
Mhm.
they give it to everybody. However,
Right.
they only fund the people that are in their formula.
Right.
So all of the people that we have outside of our formula, which is a whole
Right.
bunch, I believe,
Mhm.
we locally have to pay for that raise.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure everybody understood where we were sitting with that.
Okay, next up, I think Ms. White is with us, and she's going to talk about the new operations programs. Ms. White?
Thank you, Mr. Banks. We're going to talk about the bus operator pay scale, and I'm going to let Mr. J.R. Holland, who's with you today, discuss this portion of the program, which was developed by committee, which had bus operators on it. And I'm very pleased to present to you this afternoon, Mr. Holland and our plan for bus drivers, which is robust.
Thanks, Joyce. Good afternoon. So for me, I think retention is key whenever we're dealing with our employees. We spend a lot of time and energy on our bus operators, and also in return they spend a lot of time and energy on us. You know, it's impossible to replace experience. So we had one of our drivers come to us last spring, and I'd heard this idea kicked around a little bit before, but she was talking about how with secretaries and aides and a lot of the other service positions in state code have tiered positions. So you have a Secretary 1, Secretary 2, Secretary 3, and each tier has additional responsibilities. So that was something that one of the drivers had brought to us, and so I had Larry pull the numbers and we looked at it, and I think it was about $275,000 that it was going to cost us to do that for our employees, and that was passed. You all passed that, and I thank you for that, to put into our recruitment and retention plan. So now we have a Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 bus operator where we've worked through that. The majority of our drivers will be Tier 2, and then we're still defining, we've defined what Tier 3 will be, but we're still working on a way to refine that. So, but that was the biggest thing for us, is really just trying to retain the current people we have because of just the amount of time and energy that we put into them and in return that they put into us. Any questions?
I just got another question. Do we know of any other counties in the state that offer the tier system for bus drivers?
Not that I believe.
No.
And
The other question that I would ask is, I lost my train of thought. About how many drivers would you say currently we are still down or lacking?
Well, counting the employees that we've had that have already put in retirement that will be leaving us in June, we're looking at probably about 10 right now. That's including, we have 4 full-time bus operator, standby bus operator 8 positions. So that's including those 4 positions that are currently vacant too in that 10. So, and it seems like we always lose a couple over the summer too. So.
And then how often do you think it's necessary? I know the last time we did a look at the routes, it was something that we did when we had to do all that redistricting.
Mm-hmm.
That was painful, which obviously I suffered the consequences of as well with my own kid. But anyway, that being said, how often do you in leadership feel like it's necessary to look at those routes? I know the numbers change, I know we have to add a percentage, but it really always bothers me to see some buses really full and some buses with 10 kids on them.
Well, and I would say, I think it is important to look at our runs. Right now, our enrollment on our buses are down because of the COVID numbers. A lot of parents are still transporting if you look at the schools, we have a lot of parents transporting their kids to schools. I think, as hopefully, as we've seen, those numbers will continue to go up. One thing though that does cause us problems as far as having some buses that have a full load and other buses that don't, we're also bound by time in transit. So our younger kids can only be on the bus for half an hour, to our older kids can go up to an hour. So a lot of those, if we have a country run, like we have a bus all the way up in Bluemont, there's probably only 7 or 8 kids on that run. But the problem with that is time. We would be over that time in transit if we, went someplace else and picked up more students. So that is also something we have to take into account whenever we're working through all that also.
So do you think we'll have that next year, where we'll have some differences based on what kids are in what development, and we'll change some routes to be able to reorganize that, maybe limit some of those so we don't have such a shortage, but yet we have enough buses to get kids to where we're not dealing with that every day?
We're working on something right now where we're identifying, we're actually working with our trip committee now to kind of identify some of those bus runs, especially the ones in like a high density area that are close to schools, to where we can maybe come up with some ideas on if we continue to have a driver shortage, of a way to cover some of those areas with additional bus, or not with additional bus runs, but with other bus runs.
So it wouldn't be where you have to pay then for an additional run for a bus driver, it would be that bus route will be changed so that it includes those kids? Or would we end up then having to pay an additional run charge to the bus driver who's actually driving that, because now it's not a part of their run?
Currently, we would be paying that driver an additional monies for that. But if the trend continues, then that's something we can look at as far as incorporating that into somebody else's run.
So do you feel like that's something that the board's gonna have to say, this is what every year we want you to come back with a report that says, this is what you did to do that, to make it happen more than just when we redistrict? Or do you feel like it's something that would be at least not well received, but at least workable with the bus drivers to be able to understand that we have to look at that, just like we do with classrooms every year?
Right.
And we look at student population and where to move students, and it's something that obviously changes every year. So it's just surprising to me that we don't see it unless we ask for it. It doesn't seem like there's any changes.
It's a big task, and again, to go back, our problem right now is we could go through, and we could, based off of this year's numbers, we could go through and predict, we could go through and change those routes around. But our concern right now is if we do that, being stuck with seeing that those numbers continue to go back up with our students starting to be transported again, and then not having those buses available to them. So I think that's one of the concerns that Larry and I have talked about, because we still see our ridership still down. And we know that's going to go back up based off of what we had prior to COVID. It's still gradually going back up. So I think that's the concern right now, is if we were to change those runs around, that we may be stuck having to just add them back on again.
I guess if we're going on about other things, the seatbelts, are they ever going to be available to children on these buses? And
Well, we do have them available to our younger children. Right now, it's not mandated by the state, and it's federally, it's not mandated. I think there's two sides to that argument. There's the argument that if we have the students buckled in, the younger kids have issues getting buckled into, they're getting buckled and unbuckled. Would we have to provide an aid on those regular ed bus runs? And that's a whole nother expense that we would have to worry about. The other side of that too is, if the driver's disabled and it's just a driver and those students, then and those students aren't able to get out of the seat belts, That's another concern that we've talked about before too, so.
Mayor, I will just add to that is they designed seat belts, or the buses, Dr. Joy, so that the back of the bus seat and the way they're compartmentalized in the bus is the seat belt. That is the safety measure. And it's proven time and time again with statistics that that is a safe way to transport students. Now, what JR is referring to with those students are smaller. They're harder to compartmentalize because being smaller and at a 5, it's harder to teach them to sit up on the seat properly. But that is designed, as a bus is designed today, that is a seatbelt. And I know the legislature's brought up, do we seatbelt or do we not seatbelt many times. But in the meantime, I want you to rest assured that those buses are designed with the seats compartmentalization in order to keep the students safe on the buses.
And the way the buses are designed too, they're designed to whenever they take a large impact, they're actually designed to where they actually go off of their frame to keep them from tipping over. So they're actually, the buses are designed to, it's really rare for a bus to flip over, I should say, just because of the way they are designed. Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
And just a reminder to everyone, we probably should stick to just budget topics now, because otherwise we could be here for a week and a half talking about lots of different things.
All right, thank you. So next up is Devin Peril, and she's going to talk a little bit about truancy diversion, and she has a couple folks with her that she's going to introduce.
First, I'd like to thank the board for allowing me an opportunity to speak in front of you today. I do have several guests if you'd like to ask questions or anything at the end. Sergeant Williams, thank you, Dr. Kersey and Ms. Jenkins, to just give an overview a little bit of attendance at the school level and what they've experienced this year. So I just like to go over, we all know that good attendance is vital to our student success and that chronic absenteeism can negatively impact our student achievement. And as of today, we have 8,826 students. I just got that right at 1 o'clock today. And unfortunately, I don't love to share this number. With that, we also have 1,125 students who have 10 or more unexcused absences and 373 students with 20 or more unexcused absences. In addition, our chronic absenteeism rate is currently 25.78%. That means almost 26% of our students have missed 10% of the school year, and that includes excused and unexcused absences. So when we review chronic absences, it's, I hate to say so blunt, but like we call it seats and butts, butts and seats. And that's when students are in the building. So, you know, that's a huge number of our students who are missing academics. And so also I want to say attendance interventions have historically been reactive rather than preventative. And just in my brief time in this attendance office, I have not even been here a year, but as I'm filing some of our truancy petitions on families, it's the same families. And so these reactive resources or supports that we're trying to do are not always working for our families. So I want to just take a few moments to talk about our goal of creating a truancy diversion program that's more preventative than reactive by adding 2 truancy diversion specialists to our department. And based on the numbers with excessive absences this year, I think it's really critical that we provide more supports to our families. Our elementary school families, our Jefferson leadership team has already recently agreed to fund a family resource classes as a truancy diversion resource. We believe that families who participate will benefit from this rather than just going straight to court, to magistrate court, and families will receive meals, childcares, and family resource materials during these classes. And the goal is to support these families in identifying attendance barriers and decrease those obstacles, because I know that historically families will go to court, receive a fine, and that doesn't really address the underlying reason of what's keeping our students at home. So we believe that families will be able to learn helpful strategies in promoting good attendance and decreasing school refusal in our younger students. And these classes will be facilitated by a certified trainer, and it is being funded, and it was approved to be funded through our after-school program through American Rescue Plan. For our secondary schools, the attendance department is proposing the addition of 2 truancy diversion specialists to join our department. These truancy diversion specialists would be able to provide targeted case management to students who have previously been chronically absent, assist with student assistance team meetings, collaborate with local agencies for support, meet weekly with our identified students, and conduct home visits. The goal would be each diversion specialist would be assigned to a high school and then their feeder middle schools. And the goal would be to provide additional supports to our students in our schools. Managing regular attendance and chronic absent students can be a huge undertaking for our school administrators, and that's why I have some of our school administrators here to talk about some of that. And these additional resources, additional supports in our department at the secondary level will allow school staff more time to remain in their building and to focus on other areas of need. And then also I just wanted to highlight your packet has like some more details, and that was just a quick overview. And there's also a job description, a proposed draft job description of the truancy diversion specialist. And so I don't
Can
know.
I ask you something?
Yes, Dr. Troy, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that the system is going back to what we used to have, at which the truancy officers, I'm just concerned that we don't have an attendance policy, and wondering how that would fit in. It seems like we would need a policy, to, before, adding
Dr.
positions.
I can address that. The attendance policy was last revised in May 2021, so we do have an attendance policy. As we move toward Neola and putting our policies on Neola, we have a draft policy. However, the legislative changes this season with some policy. So to untable the policy that the board has tabled and proceed now, we need time to draft it to include the changes with the Neola policy before it is revised. I don't think anything in policy would preclude us from certainly being proactive and hiring these 2 truancy diversion workers, which are very much needed for each high school and the feeder schools, so that we can be on the side of proactively addressing students before they're chronically absent and it's too late.
And when is that gonna be, the policy you say? You kept cutting out. The truancy, the attendance policy, you're expecting it soon?
We are in the midst of drafting it.
Okay.
We have taken a lot of the in each of our departments, and we're drafting those. So we had a draft attendance policy. However, with the changes, we need to go back and revisit the changes and add the language presented. It would be our hope that we could do that in the fairly near future. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And would it be okay if do you have any questions for any of our guests about some of the experiences that they have working with attendance?
So you would go out, would you be going to the homes, the truancy officers? Is that the purpose, or do they just make phone calls?
So no, the vision would be, and they wouldn't be officers. I think that
Agents or whatever?
yeah,
you call them?
I think of an officer as Sergeant Williams, and so the truancy diversion specialists would be conducting home visits. They would be attending student assistance team meetings, IEP meetings, running reports, helping the school make that meaningful contact. As the numbers you can see, I'll use our high school as an example. They have very, very large numbers of unexcused absences in our students. And I know that Ms. Jenkins has said that the amount of time spent often trying to contact the same families and make those things. We often have to triage, and I will speak for myself. Like, I often have to prioritize. Like, this seems like an emergency today. Can we go do a home visit? Whereas hoping that we have additional truancy diversion specialists can provide more immediate support to our schools. And they also are able to build relationships with our families. If they're working with the feeder schools up till the high school, as I said, frequently we work with the same families every year. And you learn to get to know them and say, like, more comfortable, you can call and say, Mr. Banks, you're not at school today, like, what's the barrier? And you just form those connections, and families learn to trust our truancy diversion specialists, is my goal and my previous experience in a different
Would you
county.
go with, it just seems like you need 2 people to go, so how would that work? Is that enough, 2 of these truancy diversion specialists?
So that's a really great question. I currently conduct home visits 95% of the time by myself. I do have a few administrators. Dr. Kersey will frequently go out with me if I feel uncomfortable. I've done a drive-by maybe, or I just kind of get in a little prickly feeling. I do ask Sergeant Williams to conduct home visits, but ideally it is best practice for 2 people to conduct home visits together. And currently my department is a department of 2, and we don't have the manpower to have 2 go out. And so I'm asking for 2 workers with the understanding that they will frequently be doing home visits by themselves, but have more manpower if they need a partner to go with them.
Thank you very much for putting the job description in here. That helps us understand it a lot better.
All right, thank you.
And from the school's perspective, you are in agreement with this? You think this is a good plan?
Okay.
Please, come to the hot seat.
I just put together just a few notes because Devin had asked me. So when I started to work with the person who's coming in for me next year, I told her that an attendance administrator could be a 5-day job all day long. And I said, obviously, you're not going to be able to do that. You're going to have to learn to balance that. And it is. You could spend 5 days all day long working on high school attendance. And I use the exact same word Devin used as triage. I each week have to decide which kids that I'm going to focus on because I don't have enough hours in the day to work with some of these families who really do need outside resources. They need support, they need follow-up, and I can't do that by myself. I've been doing attendance for 18 years, and this year has been the highest absenteeism I've seen. And just trying to encourage kids to come to school and trying to encourage parent response, and some of them simply I'll use the word ignore me. And then I know that there's only Miss Pearl to go to. So I had to, on Friday, go to her with 2 kids, and that I could not get to respond to me. And that was a triage. They had been out for the week, and she was able to make contact. So our numbers have dramatically increased this year for a variety of reasons. And there's probably a lot of things that can fall under these 2 people that they could help school administrators. Definitely the home visits. I don't go out and do home visits. I call her. Our SRO has done a few. Getting subpoenas for truancy court, which I have this week, which will take me sitting there for hours until they call me in there. It's just a big job if you want to do it right. And I think these 2 positions could definitely help with that at the school level.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question? Or actually a couple.
Is it for me?
Yeah, you probably are the best one,
Okay.
Ms. Pearl, thank you. So remember when we hired the SOMO positions to be able to work within the schools, and I don't even remember what they were called. Does anybody else remember what
The
they were
student
called?
navigators?
There you go. Thank you. So what is the student navigator doing, I guess, as far as how are they going to be incorporated into these, or do they fall only under the SOMO department? How much is there some working together, I guess would be my first question.
So there can be a lot of opportunity for collaboration. I currently sit in staff every week with the SOMO department, and I want to be as positive as I can, but our student navigators are also tapped out, and it's hard at this point to refer students to a student navigator, especially if attendance is one of the main concerns. And it's my understanding that they are not conducting home visits, and that is, from my understanding of the board and my belief as someone who has a background in attendance and truancy prevention, is home visits are really vital, and including the family. And the student navigator really focuses, I believe, on the student, and they can be a resource and collaborate and stuff, but this is really looking at the whole family as the system, because it's usually not just the child that is the concern, especially in middle school and even in high school. We rely on our parents to get us to school, and if there is some kind of breakdown in that family unit, getting to school is not always the top priority. And having a truancy diversion specialist who cares and shows up, and what I've really stressed to families and why I try to use Sergeant Williams as my last resource is we're not here to punish anyone. We're here to be a support and get you in school, because that's what we want. And you know, we could say funny stories about some of the things that we see on our home visits and experience, but I know, and maybe Dr. Kersey can speak, but the families appreciate when we go out and make that connection with them. They know that we care. And
So I know before you've actually asked for a van to actually go pick kids up because they've missed the bus, they aren't able to do that. We actually just saw some legislative changes in how many people can ride in a vehicle and actually who can be certified to drive them, and there's all those different new regulations, I think, this year. But I know it crossed my mind as I heard those things of how that van came back, because I remember you asked about it. How do we have anything available at this point where we are able to pick up students who are not there?
so we actually, the SOMO department met with Mr. Holland in December because we do have grant funding for some additional transportation for our students, that we can do additional bus runs. And we've utilized that. We've had Driswood Elementary School call us this year and say, we have one student missed the bus, and their dad called, and we sent a bus to get the student there because we knew how important it was. And so we let families know that they can, the communication is the key, and that's what we explain. If you're communicating with us and you want us to help you, we can 100%. We're not miracle workers, but we try really hard.
And so do you think that these positions then will be like one at both high schools, but then they're going to work with all the schools?
So the goal would be that they work at they would have one high school assigned to them, and then the 2 feeder middle schools. And those would be the schools that they monitor. Based on our elementary school numbers, there is a need for additional resources, but I also don't want to overwhelm anyone because our high school numbers are very large at this time of students who have excessive absences. So the elementary schools, I will say, are really resourceful and are great at identifying their students early, and because their numbers are smaller, and I work very closely with our elementary schools. And so most likely it would be me doing the referring to the family resource classes that we plan to do for our families to try to keep them out of magistrate court.
So will they be placed one at Jefferson and one at Washington, and then deal with their feeder schools appropriately? So there's another person there to be able to identify and touch those students. I feel like if we put them here at the central office, we're not really accomplishing what we want to accomplish, which is for them to basically get in their stuff. Like, I need them to be a Sergeant Williams. I need them to, he knows everybody's name. He knows who they are, and they respect him because of that. And I feel like if they're up here, they're not going to be as known as getting them in a building and giving the guidance department as well another hand, Sergeant Williams another hand.
So that is something that would have to be decided at the school level. I don't know if I have the authority to say like, oh, I've placed this person in your building, but I can say that other counties that have truancy diversion workers, it's a various model. Frederick County and Washington County, they also have feeder schools, and they're assigned at a school and located in a school. In Berkeley County, the attendance workers are housed in one central location, but they're at their schools every single week doing the home visits, and they almost have like a traveling office. We worked a lot out of our cars.
Yeah, I'm
and
thinking
so,
that, especially if Ms. Jenkins was there, she needs to be able to go to that person and grab them, or
Mhm.
Sergeant Williams needs to be able to grab them right away and not, I need to call them up here, I need to get you to come, now I gotta wait an hour for you to get here because you're doing other things. Or, you know, if we're really going to make that, you know, the way it is, and my other concern would be to make sure that the other piece of this puzzle, should we decide on these, is every attendance director in every school, especially high school and middle school, are running afternoon reports, are doing everything they need to do. We have a good handle on our numbers, and if they're not, then to me, I don't see any need to give them someone else who's not. You know what I mean? Like, I need everybody else to do their job, so it makes this job easier. Because if they're not doing their job, they're not getting their training, then that means no one's overseeing them either. So I would rather hire that person to make that job get done and get done right, and then we would know how much more we need these folks here. Does that make sense? I mean, I understand there's two different jobs, but to me, that's the significance of making sure that that training is taking place, and I don't know, you know, if ultimately then that falls on you. Obviously, the state, I'm assuming, would do that training, but making sure that those are set up, have those people done them. If they're not, who's writing those evaluations? Because I know the principals clearly don't have time to be writing evaluations for how well the attendance directors are doing their job. You know, even though maybe that is who does it, I don't know how in the world they have time. But anyway, just, you know, as we go along, making sure that at every school level, attendance is done correctly, and we're doing what we need to do to make sure that that is just as important as, or how do these folks play into that?
just for clarification, Ms. Ogden, so I'm following. Do you, at the school level, do you mean like the attendance administrator?
Yes,
And, okay,
yes.
okay. So at the elementary school level, it's frequently a principal, depending on size, or the assistant principal. And at the middle and high school, it's an assistant principal. And they have other duties as well. So, Ms. Jenkins,
So
I'm
that-
not at Washington, but you have attendance, and what other responsibilities do you have?
Let's see, today,
I was gonna say,
today
how
I
much
build
time
a
do you have?
master schedule, discipline, school supervision, WEVIS, I mean, it's just.
So that's
part
what I
of
mean,
it.
those people who are in charge of attendance, who are at the school level, when you go in and you sign in with your attendance person that sits there and takes my information and gives me a pass, or gives my child a pass, whatever, and then if those people are responsible for doing the things they need to do, I know that has been inadequate from different reports that we have had. Every school's different, right?
Mhm.
Every person is different, every expectation is different.
Right.
So we just need to, as part of this truancy issue, because it is about attendance, we need to shore up that lower level piece as well.
Oh, yes.
And make sure that that is taken care of before we say we're just gonna add 2 more pieces to the pile when we haven't done this. So that I would ask that we can, you know, just kind of work through that, whatever training is needed, just to make sure, again, it's consistent. To go back to Dr. Joy's point of her policy, that is part of the policy. What are those expectations? They'll be adhered to. If they're not, these are the consequences. No different than our students have to take care of every day.
I think it's very important that they are placed out in the schools, because that's where they build that rapport with those children. And when they build that rapport with those families and those children, they're a lot more effective.
Yes, thank you.
And once again, we're getting into the weeds just a little bit because we're on 2B and we have to get through 12. So,
What are you saying, Ms. Skinner?
I'm saying, I'm cutting you off. And I'm also saying, Mr. Hollins, I think your part is done, and I see you looking out the window, looking at the
I'm just
weather
watching the weather
and the buses. So if
I had just a little, I think there's another part I need to, whenever we go through the budget for operations, I think there's going to be.
And I can help move us along. If you'd like us to move along, I'm ready for that part.
Well,
Thanks.
I'm going back here.
okay, so we're now on number 3. So if anybody, feel free, once you are done with your part, please don't feel like you have to stay unless you want to stay. I know some of you have more important things to do than to sit here and listen to the rest of us.
Thank you, guys.
And Mrs. White, if we could go ahead and, now that we're on number 3, if we could start with the transportation piece of it, so Mr. Hollins can leave, and then we'll come back to the nutrition piece if that works for you.
That's fine. So for the transportation budget, they're feeling the effects of the rising costs of the post-pandemic. Transportation shortages when attempting to purchase bus parts. So given that and the cost of fuel, Mr. Holland's just going to briefly speak to the rising costs and the need to raise the transportation budget by about 20-25% for the upcoming year. Mr. Holland?
Yeah, so we're asking for 20 to 25%, depending on the accounts. But the biggest things that we're having issues with are supply chain issues and fuel costs. I looked before I came in here today, and the average price for fuel in August when we started school was about $3.32 a gallon for diesel, and right now it's anywhere between $5.69 to $5.89. We're not paying quite that much for the buses, but my point is that it's raised quite a bit, and that dictates everything else. As far as getting parts, we have a hard time getting parts right now. Whenever we do, we're buying those directly a lot of the time from dealerships because they're the ones who can get them. And obviously anything we buy from a dealer is going to be a lot more than buying it from a parts store. So those are really the big issues we're seeing. Obviously tires, we're seeing an increased price in tires because of supply chain issues also. So that's basically what it boils down to, is just the cost of fuel is causing the cost of everything else to go up.
Do you know your percent of your budget that involves fuel?
So no, because that actually is handed to us by the state. The state based off of the fuel costs. The state gives us the pot of what our fuel is. We don't ask for fuel.
I'm sorry, so the state pays for it?
The state gives us, Katie, correct me if I'm wrong, but the state gives us basically what the fuel cost at the beginning of the year. We get a lump sum from the state based off of what our fuel will be. We can't touch that and put it anywhere else.
So then why are you using that as in your formula?
I can help explain that a little bit, Dr. Joy. We would have saved the mileage last year. When drivers get on their bus, every mile that rolls over, they keep mileage. That mileage is run out in the state. We're reimbursed, I would roughly say, as a medium density county, which gives us not 100% reimbursement. We're looking at 80-85% reimbursement. That would have also been based on last year's cost. It wouldn't have been based on this year's cost for account for the rise of fuel. So there is money that we have to add every year annually to the fuel budget. And what Mr. Holland is saying is that has impacted the fuel budget this year and will move it. Or we have to buffer and account for that cost in the budget.
Didn't they factor for COVID and, a lot of kids not going to school?
Yeah, we can certainly research.
I was just curious if that's what the state
I
is.
think the numbers aren't in front of us, but we're happy to research that number and get that for you.
It just seems like the state would, go back 2 years instead of a year where you're, not in school.
That's too
Right.
much.
And
Like I
that's,
said, we don't have that number in front of us, but we're happy to research it if you'd like to have that number of what it currently is.
and that's what we did on our end whenever we were looking at parts and tires and stuff like that. We looked at what we were spending 2 years ago because that was our last full year we had. And that was my point. It's not, I wasn't talking about the fuel. The cost of everything for parts and for tires and everything's going up, and it's based off, a lot of it's supply chain issue and the cost of fuel because of the shipment, delivery, stuff like that. So that's why we're seeing so much or asking for additional 20 to 25% because of everything, just the cost of, it's like going to the grocery store, everything continues to go up, and it's the same with supplies.
And I would just like to mention that from a budgeting side, we did look mostly at 2019, 2020, but we know that 2019 was our last year before COVID hit. And so we went back and we looked at those expenses and then also tried to look at where we're trending now because, you know, we're seeing these higher costs like you're speaking of. But we truly don't know once we're open next year, hopefully post-COVID, what we're going to be facing. So all the best we can do is look at trend data and currently where we are now. So just, I did that across the board.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The next thing I'll speak to is child nutrition. Due to a higher reimbursement rate and flexibility waivers from the USDA, our look to child nutrition has been lower in the past few years because they've given us more money than they normally would. The draft budget will reduce by $500,000 the child nutrition budget due to carryover from the last 2 years where we were under these flexibility waivers. However, on July 1, 2022, this higher reimbursement rate is going to end. So we're no longer going to be under the flexibility waivers from COVID for higher reimbursement rates. As a result, during 2023's budget cycle, post-COVID expenditures are going to be carefully monitored. Food costs are, and there have been high percentages of shortage this year. On the horizon, the good news is that we believe the food supply chain issues for school will begin to ease as our suppliers have plans to dedicate portions of their business solely to supplying food to K-12 schools. So we're excited for child nutrition this year, and we'll be going back to regular reimbursement rates. In the area of technology, our budget is currently robust. We've seen a rise there too in laptops, materials, and equipment. Through emergency connectivity funds, where we applied for grants, we've been able to secure a total of $1,154,362.88 to be added to our general fund. In our current budget cycle, the one we have now, as Katie was explaining, we've set aside $2,923,302 to save for our digital one-on-one. Jefferson County Schools also has 1.2 million square feet under roof and counting. In the next few years, we're going to complete 2 new elementary schools and the auxiliary. With rising costs, additional square footage will come, and we still have our aging facilities. The operation departments have worked hard the past few years to address known issues, work proactively to address emergency repairs, and try to stay out of reactive maintenance mode. We've done so through the creation of replacement schedules. Our goals are to keep the school system running efficiently and effectively. During the current budget cycle, our budget has included funds that have been designated to meet the cost of emergencies and plan for the future. These improvement funds, which were set aside during the last budget cycle, we call our capital improvement funds. They're designed to meet our ever-growing needs in many areas. The draft budget contains capital improvement funds for our upcoming budget cycle. And here's the breakdown of those funds. For Venus, we have in the current budget and will continue to set aside $500,000. For our roofs, we had $1 million set aside in the current budget cycle. We have remaining $6,000. So in our draft budget, we want to make it whole again by making our budget reflect $1 million. So the draft budget shows a contribution of $350,000 to that budget. For our HVACs, we have $1,555,000 in our current budget. We'll be carrying that over. And for our athletic fields, we have $1.1 million to carry over, and we planned in the draft budget to contribute $50,000 to that fund. So with me today to explain some of the significant impacts of rising costs and what they've had on our current budget is Brandon Caton. For Brandon's budget, the draft reflects 15% increase over last year's budget. Brandon?
Good afternoon. So what we have seen as far as with material and labor, just like with Mr. Holland, is all supply, demand, and because of the rising fuel costs. Lumber, and I'm just going to give you a quick overview, but lumber, and I based all these numbers off of the spring of 2020. So from 2020 to today, lumber is, the price of lumber has gone up 74%. Okay? Paint, 31%. Steel is up 100%. Concrete is actually only 10%, but the delivery is up more than that, but the actual concrete is up 10%. Custodial supply is up 36%. So we've spent 36% more on our school budgets than we have in years past. Your paper and pulp materials are up 15%. Packaging is up 20% as far as shipping goes. Your fuel, for heating fuel, is up 100 to 135% depending on the day. Your heating fuel is off-road diesel. So just the beginning of the year or a year ago, off-road was at $2.10. Today it's at $5.10 a gallon. Your energy costs, electricity's gone up about 45%. And HVAC, your HVAC materials, your replacements have gone up 45% since 2020 and are still rising. There's each distributor and manufacturer sending out each quarter another 10 to 12% increase each quarter. So when you take all of that into consideration, our overall increase for material in my department is anywhere from 45 to 55% more, just to buy the same thing that we bought in 2020. You know, while there's a lot of other things involved, that's just a quick overview of how everything is affected at the moment. And I'll take any questions if there are. It's pretty cut and dry.
My only thought would be, so I know we were doing the 1.6 million and moving that from the table games referendum to be, and a lot of that was funding in that maintenance area, I know, to provide the resources that we needed. So if we've cut that back, which I know we need to, for obvious reasons, which ones of these funds are actually decreased besides athletic fields as far as the maintenance amount of money we've been putting in them?
Athletic fields aren't showing a decrease. Everything that I told you is carried over in the current budget. So there's 1.1 million there, which should be left there, and a contribution of $50,000.
Right.
The only thing to reduce this year was roofs, and we're adding $350,000 back to it. Unless I'm missing an overall piece of Katie's picture, which I'll let her respond to.
I was gonna say, I think.
So that's okay. So what I was asking Joyce is, I know normally we've been putting, I think maybe $250,000 a year into athletic fields, or
Right.
whatever. So that's what I was
Right.
wondering. What's I know this year we're looking at 50,000, which is a decrease from last year for
Yeah.
obvious reasons. If we're losing 600,000, we've got to take it out of something. But what
Right.
all did we decrease in general to make sure we can still hit our numbers here?
And the overall budgeting and balancing that would be Katie's area to say what she reduced.
Okay,
You
we
know,
just want
where else she needed it. My read is she needed it in instruction or in personnel or in another area that's not outside of operations.
Okay, just want to make sure Brandon has the money he needs.
Yeah, we had to reduce those due to the recruitment and retention plan. I mean, it's very robust, but it's
Right.
very expensive, as well as our ELA adoption. And so, knowing the priorities, we had to then kind of come to the table and sit down and look at where we could, kind of make up that difference. And that's where it was, unfortunately. Now, if the board chooses to continue to put more money in there, then that's something we're going to have to figure out how we're going to fund. Because we do have a lot of competing priorities that were already approved on last year, that we do have the expenses in this fiscal year's budget as a result.
So did we increase the HVAC or the roofs allocation?
As
at all, or
far as
that's
the current
same?
budget, as far as the current budget sits, we're just doing the 50,000 for the fields.
Okay, other than that, the rest of the current allocations that we put in remained the same.
Except for roofs, we're adding $350,000 to that.
Okay, so we added,
Because-
that's what I wondered, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. Okay, great, thank you.
Ms. White, is that all for you?
Thank you.
Okay.
so next up on our list is retention and recruitment. And the items that Amy's going to talk about were approved by the board in November and now must be incorporated into our base budget.
This section of the presentation is to briefly go over the retention and recruitment plan. As you know, we presented it in the fall and it was approved by the board, and we also talked about it in more length when the state superintendent came. We went over the different sections that you had approved in the detail and what those programs each look like. So in order to honor your request and your approval of the retention and recruitment plan from this current school year, it has been built into the 23 budget, fiscal year 23 budget, for approximately about $3.5 million. And so just to remind the highlights of the recruitment and retention plan, and as it is written into this budget proposal and presentation, is the micro-credentialing, which is a large component of that recruitment and retention plan. 2 additional days of classroom preparation for our teachers before the school calendar officially starts. The tuition reimbursement program, which we presented at a previous board meeting. The attendance incentive match for our service personnel that matches the state attendance program for our professional employees at the schools. The employee referral incentive, the nurses stipend on the medical and therapeutic index chart, the payment of coaching, athletic coaching credential costs and their stipend structure. The board's payment of all West Virginia Department of Education licensure costs, including the cost to become a substitute teacher with the Department of Education. The payment of background checks for our employees, the career service ladder, and then the service senate funding. And as JR highlighted earlier, the bus operator pay tier structure as well. Any questions on the recruitment and retention plan? Is it what's in the current budget proposal?
Just our 2 days, since we've already approved the calendar, did we approve that with the extra 2 days already in there, or do we have to go back and reapprove the calendar for the 2 days?
No, we don't build them in there because they're on the 200-day contract, so it's outside of the 200 days, so it's not a part, it can't be a part of the employment term calendar.
Okay. So we'll pay them to come in, but
Yeah, they would submit a supplemental pay form for the days that they do come in. Remember, it's optional, it's not required. So if they choose to participate in that, then they can submit their supplemental pay form for those 2 additional days of prep. Yes.
I saw that earlier. I was thinking about that. So those 2 additional days of classroom preparation are optional.
Mm-hmm. Yep, because it's not, we can't extend their employment term, so they're 200 days. And I don't remember, I don't have the school calendar in front of me, so I don't remember what we approved as the first day of that employment term, so it's before those days.
So, just saying,
Mm-hmm.
any of the new stuff that's been approved that we need training for,
Mm-hmm.
if the principal or if Ms. Tanya associates that they have to come learn these programs or attend this training, they don't have to come to those PDs on those 2 days.
No, it's so the PD
If
days,
there wasn't any PD.
Yeah, the PD days are built into the 200-day employment term, so they
okay.
will still do those.
Gotcha.
So those 2 preparation days are in addition to that. So they would, if they want to use it, they would come in those 2 days to do their preps. But it was with the understanding and the agreement with administrators that they're there to prep their rooms. So there's no PD, no meetings. They're
Got it.
there just to
That's
prep.
a good thing.
And then the PD is built into their 200-day employment term.
Got you.
August 15th. So those 2 days would be utilized by the educator prior
And we
to
start
August
when
15th.
the school it starts.
August 15th starts the, that's the employment term. And then they have their curriculum development days, the 16th and the 17th. They have their prep day that's built in the calendar on the 18th, and then their professional learning is on August 19th. And then students start August 22nd.
I just remember it
Yeah.
seemed like it came fast when I taught in Jefferson. Then
Right.
it was like 2 days, and before you know it, you had students. I love that I saw the 2 days. So thank you for explaining
Yeah, no
how those
worries.
2 days actually work on those calendars.
Yeah, no, that's great. I thank you for the question because I think that it pops up, so it's good to be able to have that common understanding for all of us as far as what those 2 days will mean and when they fall and how they're going to be paid for them if they participate.
And in the past, we had teachers come in and do the prep days on their own. They would come in and get their classrooms ready, but this just is the vehicle to actually pay them for the being there. Thank you.
Yeah, and that puts us a little bit more in alignment with districts that are not in West Virginia because that doesn't seem to be kind of the West Virginia way of doing it. So it helps us align with more of those school districts that
Yes, ma'am.
we're in competition with.
Thank you.
Okay. Then I'm just going to stay up here because the next the next section is in the budget is the continuation of the permanent substitute program. So that was also in the retention and recruitment plan. And you heard where we were able to get and obtain permanent substitutes during this school year and how that helped those schools. And so we want to continue that model for the 22-23 school year, but change it a little bit because of one, the ability to fund it, but also the availability of substitutes who are willing to serve in these roles. So providing the services again for 22-23 school year with the model that we would have one professional substitute who would be rotating between the two high schools. There'd be 2 of those. Then we would have 2 professional substitutes that would split between 2 middle schools. So if we did Harpers Ferry in Charlestown and Wildwood in Shepherdstown Middle School, you would have a substitute for those 2 groups of middle schools. And then 2 splitting between a block of 5 elementary schools. And then having 2 special education service personnel who would be work daily but on call to serve our schools when we need service special ed assistance throughout the school year.
I'm a bit concerned with that ratio at elementary level.
The 2 to 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very token amount we're giving elementary.
It is, and we'll have to monitor that to see if we can get the response that we hope for.
Yeah, I just remember the principal of Washington saying they were fine, they didn't need the sub. I just wonder how this all fits in with the LSIC requests. Like, you know, I looked through, I mean, maybe it's embedded, like this is part of a request perhaps, but are those going to be addressed, like the interventionists and that the schools requested? Are those embedded in this whole presentation?
This is, yes, the substitute. The
I know
continuation
some
of that.
schools requested the sub, but
Mhm.
not all did. So
Right.
will these schools get what they asked for? Or is that part of
Well-
a different plan, like outside of this budget meeting?
So did you want to talk?
No, it's coming up in the
Yeah.
budget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you're gonna bring it up. I
Right,
just
right.
see where it would be. Okay.
No, but you're right. This the substitute program. Not only is it a part of the recruitment and retention plan, but you are correct that it is also part of that conversation, that request from the LSIC meetings in response to that. Any other questions? So, well, Mr. Osborne will definitely take a note of that concern and have that conversation for follow-up.
Okay, so in front of you also is a document that's about 13 pages long, I believe, and it's called EPIC. So EPIC has come up quite a bit recently in conversation, so we wanted to make sure you had that in front of you so that you can take some time and look through that to see what EPIC is. I know many of you are familiar with EPIC. Some of you may think that EPIC is kind of like it used to be when it was RISA, and it's not that at all anymore. I think if you could draw a comparison to Epic, it would be a company like Soliant. Soliant is a company that we contract with for nursing services, for speech and language services, for school psychologist services, and we pay them a fee, and they employ the person and send them to us. But when they do that, there are all these other additional costs that they add into it, such as they'll pay an employee from the time they leave their house and pay them an hourly wage. They'll pay their travel. They'll pay, obviously, benefits and other things. Plus, the companies have to make a profit also. So if you could compare Epic to something, it would be more along the lines of Soliant. It is no longer what RESA used to do, although it does offer a lot of the same services that RESA used to. One of the things I want to point out to you, and this is because of the vision of Mr. Wink, and on the first page it says Epic is available to develop new services and programs in addition to existing services. So he saw the need in particular with two areas, school psychologists and BCBAs, which is board certified behavior analysts. And so we are currently contracting with Epic to provide those positions. Again, they are supervised, evaluated, report to Epic. So that's how that works. So again, just look at it just like a company like Soliant. Instead of Soliant, we're contracting with Epic to provide the services. So I don't know, I think you guys can take some time and read through this, but I've tried to sum it up as best as I can in a few sentences there. I also know that we have, I think, Mr. Osborne, you're on the board for Epic, is that correct, or am I mistaken there?
I'm the regional chairman for.
Regional, okay.
for Epic.
So, and it's made up of, just one, I'm sorry, I left one other thing. It's made up of the following counties: Berkeley, Grant, Hampshire, Hardy, Jefferson, Mineral, Morgan, and Pendleton. And then they've added additional counties, Monongalia and Tyler County, in addition to the West Virginia School for the Deaf and Blind. So.
And a board member and a superintendent from each county is on that council.
Okay.
And we need one
So
more.
each of those districts does have a representation on the board for Epic.
And different counties have different needs. And so
Right.
they try to dovetail into those needs of each county.
Mm-hmm.
So is it correct that these positions, the board never sees them or approves of them? They'll just be, we just approve paying Epic this random number and we don't know what they're going for. So it sounds like there's a school psychologist that we're paying for, and there's a
Will be.
BCBA,
Mhm.
and Dr. Gibson said that she would provide the list of all of the positions that we're paying for currently.
Yeah.
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 And I
Go
just
ahead.
want to make sure that we're differentiating here because they're not positions that we're hiring for. They're services that we're obtaining through Epic.
Okay.
And so the services that we utilize from them, so when you see those on the statements during the board meetings, would be for the Head Start, Early Head Start, the adolescent health and wellness trainings.
Is it possible to get that list? Because I can't remember. all
It's
that.
actually checked on
Oh,
here.
okay.
Yeah, so if this
So
is on here, so
this-
yeah, so on here is the list of services that we currently utilize and pay for, and so the check marks indicate those.
Oh,
So
okay.
we have technology services that we use with Beavis, investigative services, the mental health services, which is where you'll find the school psychologist services that you mentioned.
And so how many, this is just the general, like Head Start, how many of those services? Is it one person or?
I
It
don't
just
know how
seems
many.
like there's no way to keep track.
It depends on the need of
Right.
the district, just like
Right.
Mr. Osborne was referring to.
Right.
Jefferson would need fewer school psychologists than Berkeley, for example.
Right.
And so it also depends on whether we have any ability to find our own people and employ them here.
Right.
Well, like the
And the one-off
Weavis
things.
position, that used to be here, and that was something we clearly could have. I'm just trying to understand why how can the board see what we are, paying for regularly? Instead of just $15,000 a month for Weavis, it would be substitute teacher training that month. don't know, bus operator training. Just wondering how many of these services are we, you know, I can see the general number, but how many bus operators get training?
And that really depends on how many, you know, what that training
how
need
much
is
the
for
need
that
is.
month.
I know what it depends on, I'm
Right.
just trying to see if we can get a list of, could this be included instead of just asking the board to agree to pay this EPIC a lump sum without really knowing what we're paying for.
Yeah, we will definitely pass it on to Dr. Gibson,
But
so
I-
she knows.
Can I piggyback on Dr. Joy and I'm glad Mr. Osborne was here. So if I'm a concerned parent, what's the benefit? And I believe there are some. What would you say are the benefits for us using EPIC services?
Couple examples. One example would be is if they have those, since they're a regional consortium and they have that kind of focus structure and that focus support system where they're able to provide those services for multi-counties and they're already doing that, then we can share resources.
Share, does that mean we save some money somewhere?
I was gonna say, you'll have to answer on that side of things.
Not that-
On the other hand of things, there are one-off positions or one-off type of services that are new. So for example, if you go to the West Virginia Code Book on school personnel, you're gonna typically find the listing of positions that correlate with what a school district may employ. That doesn't take into account, think of how long ago code was written. There's a lot of changes and a lot of new responsibilities that a school district has to do in order to meet our due diligence, and that happens to be investigative services. That you're not going to find that in the in the personnel book, but they also you know, have that resource and those services that they provide to the school districts where we can go through them. So that's an example of where we need to expand just because of the growth and the change in needs in running a school district as efficiently and effectively as possible.
A lot more flexibility of scheduling.
Flexibility of
Some
scheduling,
people
yeah.
maybe only want to work 4 days a week. Maybe we share an OT with Hardy County or someplace like that because we only have a need for 2 days a week. Those are some of the kind of things that come up.
Right. Flexibility is a big thing because the way that the state interprets half-time, in order to be eligible for benefits or underneath the retirement system, is that you have to work a half day every day, Monday through Friday. Well,
Yes.
what follows that as half-time anymore? Half-time can mean different things. It's not just a Monday through Friday,
Gotcha.
8 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. It's the work world has evolved since then. So to Mark's point,
Thank you.
absolutely
I just-
flexibility.
That's, Dr. Joy,
Doesn't
that's,
give.
the first
This-
one's not
Yeah,
complete,
that's
so
please.
this is the better.
Oh, okay.
That's why we got, yeah, turn on the topic. The other question that I have though too, or just I guess statement I would make is, in the fact, like you're talking about with the either legislative law change or the books being different, the legislative, or even just the personnel laws, it also enables us to hire someone that we may need as an interim, position, so that if we don't need them, or frankly, within the budget, we can't afford them. It allows us to be able to make the changes that we need to make without without being effective to, student population as well and people we have at the school system level. So I appreciate the fact that they give us that flexibility too.
Right, absolutely. The working world has changed, and
Yeah.
flexibilities
Yes, it is.
need to come with that in order for us to do what we need to do to the best of our abilities.
Yes, ma'am.
How about the adult education pieces? I know we have, is it Beth Retson?
Yes.
I never can pronounce her last name, so I'm not even gonna try it. I don't wanna screw it up. But right now, is she the only person that I know of that's employed for Jefferson County Schools in that regard, or do we have help for her? I know that program, of course, through COVID.
Yeah, no, that's
Definitely increased.
Yeah, she is employed directly by Jefferson County Schools, and then the other adult ed instructor transferred. But we're going through a process right now. There's some grant availability to bring back that second position, so we're working through the details of that in order to get that position that's a little bit more robust through the grant funding. So Mr. Webb's working through that.
Wonderful.
Mhm.
I know that was
Yep.
definitely.
Plus that number is, that she's serving is raising exponentially.
It is, and I think
no
with
way
that,
she can do it.
that grant provides too for additional days as well. So we'll,
Okay.
I'm hoping that it will, that's the framework in that grant, is to be able to provide more days. So we should be able to see an increase of service with that position as well when we bring it back. But that's going through the grant funding steps right now, so hopefully.
Thank you.
Anything else on Epic?
Okay, so next up, Mr. Wink will be sharing with you staffing changes to support the more intensive special education service support model that was presented to you earlier. So, Mr. Wink?
Thank you, members of the board. I'm tonight again, today, this afternoon, with you, and I want to thank Ms. Horning for coming out and staying to support me as well. At the second board meeting in April, we presented to you our overview as well as some very heavy presentations from our staff members, which I very much appreciated. And today I'm presenting you with a version 2. The changes have been are noted in red, and the only real changes here are as a budget consciousness to eliminate or to phase in one of the larger things, the third BCBA, as well as the registered behavior technicians. In talks with Ms. Russell as well as my department, we made a budget decision to say, hey, let's put that on a phased in model and not bring that up right now. So we have taken that out, but I'm not going to take up your time this evening because I know that is crucial for other things, but I have provided you with a changed version. What I do just want to take a couple minutes to talk about is the page that is landscaped, that talks about special education programmatic changes resulting in budget changes. The first line item that was also in the reorg is a move of positions from special education consultants. We have 3 of those here that are currently 210 days to a special education facilitator at 220 days. The second move is a move of position from the lead special education consultant of 240 days to the lead special education facilitator of 240 days. And that estimated cost differential is $39,000. Of course, that is fluid based off of who is in those positions, as well as any kind of raises that may come in from the State Department. We are proposing to eliminate a position from special programs. We have a half-time Medicaid secretary that has been unfilled since January, when our Medicaid person took a private job in Virginia. And we are proposing to eliminate that position, and those duties will then be absorbed by the director as well as the assistant superintendent. In your proposal, as well as on the next line item, is the creation of 3 new positions. These are the 3 elementary liaisons. They will be deemed as service positions. These are the positions that will be giving boots on the ground support to our teachers as well as to our administrators, as far as scheduling meetings, ensuring paperwork is where it needs to be. A lot of the administrative time that our IEP teachers, our special education teachers, are taking after the students are not in school or before the students are in school, we're taking that off, and we want to put that on these 3 liaisons, and they will be divided up based off of what the caseloads look like at each school. We will divide them out into that area. The creation of a new autism instructional consultant position, that will be we are proposing that to be at a 210-day position, as well as the creation of the multidisability instructional consultant position at a 210-day rate also. Now I guess I can take questions here in just a second. The cost of that $293,150 is being offset by Mr. Banks's ELA adoption, a reduction of ELA adoption cost there is projected to offset that. On the bottom there, these are the educational savings that we project out of special programs department to occur in the 2022-2023 school year. We have a reduction, or one outside placement at a local school is going to be coming back, so we will not be incurring that tuition. We have 2 other students that are outside placement in Maryland currently. That one will be returning to Jefferson County schools. One will be going to live with a relative in a different state due to some situations there. The projected savings with the movement of our psychologists and our BCBAs over to Epic, we are projecting a savings of $620,000. We are asking Epic to contract with us the same number of psychologists that we had previously, as well as the same number of BCBAs that we had previously. We had previously contracted 4 of our 5 psychologist positions, and we previously contracted 1 of our 2 BCBA positions. So we are entering into the contract with Epic, and we look for a pretty significant savings there with their new contracts. As well as you'll remember, at the second board meeting in April, I came to you and asked for approval for an RFP to go out. We have brought that RFP back, and we anticipate bringing it to you at the May 23rd board meeting. And with your approval at that meeting, we anticipate approximate cost savings of $100,000 from the new RFP that went out for the rest of our contracted services that we have to have. All told, we're looking at about $829,000 that we're hoping to bring back into Jefferson County while not impeding the services that our students need for the county. So at this time, I will take any questions that you might have.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
The liaison, are they professionals?
No, ma'am, they will be service. Yes, ma'am.
So what, it sounds like you mentioned would they be doing IEPs?
They would not be writing IEPs, no,
Okay.
ma'am. The teachers would still be writing the IEPs. They would be scheduling them. They would be making sure the paperwork got from one place to the other. They would be making sure that the meetings were held. There's a lot of administrative stuff that occurs outside of writing the IEP.
Do
And
you have special ed coordinators at these schools? There's none?
at the elementary schools, no, ma'am. No,
Okay.
ma'am. They are teaching a full load as well as doing the duties.
So 3 elementary liaisons, are they for 3 schools that you've picked?
No, ma'am. They will be for all of the elementary schools, but some of our schools that have lower caseloads, we will combine them together. Some of our larger schools may get one dedicated to them.
Okay.
Like TA Lowry is a larger caseload of schools, so they probably won't split with anybody, or they will split with a
And
much smaller school.
The consultant, the autism and multi-disability consultants, what are they?
So these are professionals that we are asking to come in that can be with our long-term subs on a daily basis. So we're running about 66% long-term subs in all of our classrooms. So we are looking to hire a autism consultant as well as a multi-disability consultant that can go out to help sit alongside the teachers and say, these are strategies that we would suggest that you implement. These are curriculum. Let's go look for this curriculum. I'm going to teach while you watch me do it, that type of thing.
But my question is about the salary. So are these based on teacher salary? I mean, it looks like.
So this is an all told district cost. This includes the Social Security, Workman's Comp, FICA. This includes all of those things above and beyond what a teacher looks at for their salary.
Okay, so if a teacher's making $50,000 a year, how much would this position pay? The regular teacher salary, or?
They would be paid the regular teacher salary with 10 additional days.
So I'm just wondering where you get this $80,000 figure from.
So we took a middle of the road 15-year teacher, and then Ms. Russell gives us a ballpark of 33% for all the other stuff. So that's where we kind of.
But you're intending to hire a special ed teacher in the county to do this position?
I cannot tell you who I'm intending to hire until I see the pool of applicants that come to us. I can't say that I'm going to pull a teacher out of the classroom or I can't tell you who I'm looking to pull for that job. I'm looking for the most qualified applicant to service this.
And one more question, the special education center that was talked about a few times, where is that?
So Dr. Ebersole, myself, Mr. Webb, and Ms. Fitzgerald we have toured 3 different facilities. We went to the facility in Frederick County, Virginia, Eastern NREP. It's called Northern Regional Education Program, I think is what it's called. You can help me on that, Mr. Brown.
That's it.
We toured NREP. We went down to Kennedy Krieger. We visited Kennedy Krieger as well. And then we also are touring the alternative placement up in Hagerstown, up in Washington County, Maryland. And we are putting together what our thoughts are in terms of how they are doing things, and then we need to come back to JLT as well as into the board to present a plan of what it's going to look like and the feasibility of it in terms of all the other projects that we have going on.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Who has the responsibility for training these elementary liaisons? Because that's going to be very important.
These people will be trained by my facilitators, will be the primary ones. The four individuals that are in my office will be the primary ones that get them going on the ground, and then they will also follow up with them as well for the trainings, much like we do with our teachers when our teachers come back, or if we have new long-term subs, it's Ms. Horning, Ms. Pangle, Ms. Dingus, and Ms. Fisher that are the ones that are responsible for training those teachers, as well as, we have our Rockstar IEP teachers in the building as well that pick up some of that, but they will be primarily here at the board level trained.
Question. The lead special education consultant, would that be out in the schools or they're here?
That would be here.
Okay.
That would be here, but then they would also be divided up depending on whether it's elementary or
Gotcha.
secondary.
Gotcha.
What is the projected enrollment for, is it decreased or for next
For
year?
special
Do you know?
education?
Or overall, just overall and,
I can't speak to overall. I can speak to special education is projected to increase, but I can't speak to the overall
okay.
as far as that
What's
looks like.
special ed then?
As of the April, we were at 1,256, but I can tell you that, Christy, you did another 50.
Yeah, we have a lot of referrals for testing in queue right now, and as we meet with those families, we look for the number of students eligible to rise.
So how many in elementary then projected for the?
I can get you those numbers, but again, we don't want to project because that's a child find process to figure out if they're eligible. So we can come back to you and say these are the number that have been referred for testing at each level, at elementary and then secondary. I'd be happy to provide that to you, but I can't give you a projection of how many of those we think would be receiving services. But yes, ma'am, I can give you the number that's on in the queue. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Green, can I just ask a question? The director position, is that what the lead special education consultant position will be next year, or the director position will still be there?
The director position will still be there, yes, ma'am.
So are these new positions, or these are positions that we already have and we're just changing those positions?
These are positions that we are proposing to replace. Amy, I'm gonna try to get this.
I'm just trying to figure out this breakdown of how that
Okay.
is.
Yeah, I'll talk about that when I get out, yeah.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. Okay, and then the elimination of the Medicaid. So I know it was probably the year before last, because last year I know with COVID was kind of crazy. But I remember that it was Medicaid billing came in and we got a lump sum because it was like 3 years past, whatever. It was just, obviously that's always been an issue.
Mhm.
So do we have somebody at Epic that is going to do this billing, or it says absorbed by a director, which we don't have, and assistant superintendent. So I'm assuming assistant superintendent would be you,
Yes, ma'am.
but I'm thinking, like, how exactly do you plan to fit Medicaid billing in your schedule? I'm looking back at Ms. Horning going, I think I know who's going to end up with that. But I'm like, that's a significant, it can be,
Mhm.
right? If it's done right, it can be a significant amount of funding for us.
Absolutely.
And should be replaced funding. So I'm a little bit concerned as far as taking that out.
And I would be honest with you that over the past year and a half to 2 years, we have worked with a company in West Virginia that actually has an online portal where all of our therapists are able to put their billings into, as opposed to that all coming over to the board office, all of us inputting it and then pushing it out. So they have, and our therapists are just over the moon over the process, over the eDocs process. They love it. So it really streamlines our process in terms of getting the billing. The difficult part is getting out to train them on the eDocs system, as well as training them into everything else like our personal care, our management system, getting those people trained. That's where we take up a lot of time, and we're going to do a lot better job, because to say that we're billing on everything we can be billing on would be a lie if I was going to say that to you. So we really want to take that on ourselves, because I believe that we can do that, and I believe it's financially responsible for us to take that on. And be better stewards of the money. So I think that we can.
And is that something we could work with maybe the technology director to videotape, like they did for Canvas, like they did for whatever, where we could send that out to the new staff, and it's a training video that they can watch and go through and have that?
Possibly when you're talking about federal funds, I don't know that doesn't have to be me in front of you and let's go over it, but we could possibly look into that. We have been in talks with Mon County.
Yes.
Mon County has this tied up. They are rock stars at it, evidently, in talking to the lady that does the portal. And she said, so we're going to reach out to Mon County to see when we can go over and spend a day or two and just understand how they do everything, because they are 100% paperless. Everything is done in there, and they are doing a really good job. So we're looking at already talking to Mon County about that.
Okay. And I mean, I love the fact that with the, instructional consultants, I mean, I think about how, we put the money and the effort and the time into those instructional coaches at the general education level, and it's just as needed, if not more, like you said, with all of the part-time and long-term subs. And I know, Ms. Warren, you brought that up as far as how much time you needed in the school buildings just to teach and to train. And so,
well, our goal is to be able to not only provide that support to our special educators who may be long-term subs or not, but then to also provide that to the general ed teachers who have these students in their classrooms, who need to know how to modify the work, who need to know the same practices of how to engage with those students. So to have somebody boots on the ground that can be there more often than, say, somebody like myself or any other individual in our office is going to really provide them with that hands-on support as necessary.
And the only other thing I would like to say is that when we pull teachers out of buildings, or our consultants, so our consultants here at the board office, Ms. Pango, Ms. Fisher, they're paid a teacher salary. So if and I don't want to say this to Ms. Horning too loud, but if she were to take an autism job in the classroom, she would make 3 pay grades higher than where she is right now working with me. My other 3 consultants, they're working 210 days. They're making less than a 200-day teacher in special education. Because that's how the state says you have 3 bumps. Well, those people aren't in front of kids, so they don't get those 3 bumps. So that's kind of where we're looking at the 220 days, as well as the facilitator stipend, to really say we have a great responsibility that we're putting on these people to mentor them. So that's really the reason why that push is there, as well as the autism and the multi-disability. When they come out, they're going to step down 3 pay grades. So we're hoping that those 10 extra days is going to offset a little bit of that to make it attractive for people to come in or to do those things.
I think that's fair. It's definitely needed. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr.
Ms. Warren and I are
Wink,
going to tag team the next section.
I was just going to say, before we start, I just want to thank Mr. Wink, because it's not many times people come and save money. Normally they spend money. So you're like a unicorn right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
And one of the things, just to piggyback on his presentation, is that one of the things that is important in a recruitment and retention plan that you saw a little bit of it, but didn't go into that plan as far as a higher, like a wired in and concrete approach, is what you do in an organization to provide growth opportunities for your employees. And a lot of the positions that Mr. Wink needs to restructure and give thought to is how you can grow your employees in Jefferson County Jefferson County schools into positions where they can expand and use their talents for the students of our school system. One of the documents that we put in front of you was it kind of resembles the personnel actions that we put in each board meeting. And this resembles what you would normally see when we put the RIF and transfer positions before the board before May 1st. And what we did is we extracted the positions that were going to be impacted or changed as far as this budgetary process, so that way we could have it all together in one concrete presentation. The first section, and Mr. Banks is going to go into some of these a little bit more in the next sections of today's agenda, but because some of these addressed Matt's special education positions and the positions that are covered in the rest of the agenda, we just wanted to bring this to your attention because this is something that will be used in order to approve the elimination of some positions from the budget, but also to move some programs around and to create some programs in response to enrollment numbers, student ratios, programmatic needs, LSIC responses, rubric of needs, etc. So the first section, I did make some changes to the document from recent information that I received from the copy that you received in advance last week. And I removed the STEAM teacher from the first section, number 4, because I've moved it to the next section, and I'll go over that in just a second. But also the first grade position, because there is Title I funding from that, so I've removed that from the list of eliminations. In the second section are the positions when we took from student ratios, enrollment, and we were able to, we had to reduce a position from some programs and then increase the position in another program. So you kind of match those up so you can balance it out to see what your true eliminations and your true additions are. So these are the positions that we can move and still cover within the budget without eliminating or asking for an increase with position creations. I mentioned that I moved number 4 to the next section, which is now number 22. And we can move that STEAM position because we were originally going to decrease one at Blue Ridge and then increase through Title I funding a STEAM teacher at Ranson Elementary. The third section, the creation of new positions, would be based on student enrollment in our special education programs. And those are listed for the positions that we need to create in order to meet those ratios and those student needs based on the data that we received. And then also 34 through 36 would be the positions that Mr. Wink outlined in his presentation. Going back to section 2, when we talked about the reallocation or the movement of the special ed consultant positions to the facilitators. So that would be reflected in 18 and 19. And that would resemble the same process that we did for reorganizing or realigning some positions recently, where you would take you would move the position of the lead special ed consultant to the lead special education facilitator and move the position of the special education consultants 210 days to the special education facilitator, 3 of those positions for 220 days. So if we approved, what we would do is we would post the special education facilitators at 220 days, and then based on how that search would result, you would either, once those positions are filled, you would eliminate the special education consultant positions through the RIF and transfer season. So we're not adding, we're brand new positions. We would be realigning those and then eliminating the ones as they currently exist. And that would be the same for the lead special education consultant realigning that position to a lead special education facilitator. And then we would eliminate the consultant position either through attrition or through the RIF and transfer process. And then you have your high school registrars, as we discussed through the counseling process, from the 220 days to 240 days for both high schools, and then the high school counselor from 220 days to 225 days.
Can you, Ms. Lauren,
Yes.
can you just explain the high school registrar? Like, I know they have a lot of things to do to get kids registered as far as summertime especially,
Right.
right? People show up and there's no one there.
Correct, so those additional days would be the response to that need and that process in the summer, having somebody at the high school where families could go and register their students during the summertime.
So they would be working, what would it be, 10, 20, would all of those 20 days be before the start of school? Since they already have, 5 days after the end of school?
Yeah, it depends, so it'd have to go through the process to switch those if approved, but you would want to try to fit in as many days as you could the rest of this employment term. But again, I don't know that part of the program, but typically what happens, and we'd have to look to see what the needs are for that scheduling, but typically you would split it where you would do 20 days before school and then 20 days at the end of the school year in order to fit that 240 in for the school-based positions.
Okay. Are you ready for questions?
Oh, sorry, I got one more section. And then the requested program additions, the Grow Your Own Teacher program, as we discussed and did that presentation within the last month, that we can cover the creation of that program with support by going through the 1/7 pay option. And then again, I'm going to let Mr. Banks go into this with his sections, but the program additions through our staffing process would be an itinerant school counselor between Wildwood Middle School and Shepherdstown Middle School, a social studies teacher at Washington High School, the truancy diversion specialist, 2 of those, as Ms. Pearl had presented earlier, the assistant principal itinerant with Wright Denny, and then Paige Jackson, assistant principal for Ranson, assistant principal itinerant between Shepherdstown Elementary and North Jefferson, and then the part of the summer program, having an elementary summer registrar for 20 days during the summer, and then a middle school summer registrar for 20 days to help with enrollments during the summer to provide that support and services to our community. And then Mr. Banks has some more talking points in regards to those. So if you don't mind, I'm going to let him present on those because those may address some of the questions, and then we can
I
circle
just
back.
have questions about what you just presented.
He's going to talk some more about it, and then he may be able to address those, and then we'll circle back to questions.
And I may say, hey, Andy, can you answer that? All right. So some additional details about the positions that Andy was referring to. So the Grow Your Own program, you heard a little bit about that during the state superintendent visit. We're going to offer classes to juniors, rising juniors and seniors who we're encouraging to get into the educational field, starting them off with coursework at the high schools and also coordinated through Shepherd as well as Blue Ridge. And what we're asking for there is that we want to pay a teacher 1/7 pay at each high school to start that off. As that program continues to hopefully grow, then we may be coming back and asking for additional staff. But at least starting out, we're going to ask for 1/7 at each high school. As at the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that many of what we're requesting are based on numbers and recommendations. So the school counselor that you see under the requested program additions, the recommendation at the state level is that you don't exceed 350 students per counselor. So at Wildwood Middle School, we're well over that. And at Shepherdstown Middle School, we're very close to approaching that. So that's why that position is we're being asked for. And I also believe, getting to Dr. Joy's point, that was requested at LSIC. The social studies position is, again, numbers, student course requests that are at Washington High exceeded the number of courses that could be offered by the current staff. Right now, there are 9 social studies teachers at Washington High. Conversely, there are 10 math, 10 science, and 10 ELA teachers. So this would bring all the staff to 10 at Washington High.
In addition to that, if we do not add the social studies position based on numbers, then we would not be able to offer 9th grade AP social studies in the schedule next year. So I know that's a significant issue and concern, and so that's a necessity of that position request.
Thank you. Truancy diversion specialist, you heard about that earlier. The AP positions, in speaking to Dr. Gibson, there was a 5-year plan that had been implemented here in the district, and part of that plan was to add additional assistant principals. So as part of that plan, then the rubric of need, which many of you might be familiar with, that's based on student enrollment, it could be based on poverty, it could be based on number of referrals for discipline, a whole number of factors. But based on that rubric of need, it was determined that we're requesting assistant principal to be shared at Wright Denny and Page Jackson, a full-time assistant principal at Ranson, and then an assistant principal to be shared at Shepherdstown Elementary as well as North Jefferson Elementary. And if you're wondering, I don't think it's been determined, where they would go and what days or anything about their schedule. That would be done later on, if approved. And I think you already covered the summer registrar stipend. Is that correct? Okay.
Is it possible to ask questions now?
Yes.
The 5th grade teacher removal, 5th grade teacher number 6, is that because of enrollment?
No, yeah, numbers.
And was the 1st grade because of enrollment? Why is it that you can now fund that with Title I and you can't the 5th grade?
I don't have the ratio numbers in front of me, but I believe it was that the 1st grade position had more of it was closer to the enrollment threshold than what 5th grade was. And also by adding, based on Mr. Astor, scheduling, with the increase or the addition of the STEAM position, that gave him the flexibility to schedule his programs for next year in order to help with the numbers in 5th grade.
What's the pay difference between a consultant and a facilitator?
The facilitator falls on the stipend tiers. The consultants, do they? I don't have the stipend chart in front of me. The consultants?
10, 12, 15, 15.
What?
10%, 12%, 14%, 16% based on years of experience. That's where a facilitator. Consultant has nothing. It's just.
I was gonna say, I didn't think the consultant does not qualify for any additional stipends, where the facilitator does.
Are these predetermined
No.
stipends?
Oh, stipends? I'm sorry, what do you mean?
Yeah. The facilitator qualifies for stipends, and these are standard regular stipends they would get, or?
It's, the position is on the stipend index chart, so it's,
Okay.
I can't remember what tier it is, it might be tier 3 or tier 4.
Based on years of service?
And then it's based on your years of service, yes.
The 1/7, you're saying 1/7 pay, how much is this for a student?
So what you would do is you take a teacher who might teach 7 periods, and you divide their salary by 1/7, and they would get additional 1/7
Oh, this is the teacher
pay.
who will teach
Yes.
a
Correct.
student?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And I still don't see any creations for interventionists. And that was what these LSIC, many of these principals asked for. I know several, and I don't, it's not on here anywhere.
Right. I know that, speaking on behalf of Dr. Gibson, I know that there were quite a few positions that were listed as, positions needed or wanted for the budget. After looking at it and being in a fairly difficult spot, many of the positions that we wanted to put in were not able to be included in the budget. Instead, what you're looking at are the ones that are needed based on numbers mostly. And I think, to answer one of your questions from earlier, this draft budget is also based on a projection of an increase of 150 students for next year. It's, it's very difficult to predict.
Is that without the charter schools?
Yeah, that's certainly one of the factors. And then you also look at your current pre-K numbers, and you look at your current numbers in all your other grades, and then you make your best guess. And then when October 10th rolls around, second month rolls around, then that's when you find out what your actual enrollment.
When do we find out how much of what the principals asked for will they be getting? Because
Sure.
I know there's a couple,
Right.
electric alarm systems or an awning, but
So what happened after the LSIC meetings is that we then did our staffing meetings with each of the principals, and it wasn't just staffing, it was budget too. So they come and they present the information that they need and make those requests. So out of those conversations, I believe we had 2 that moved forward as far as making official, when you put down your list of wants and your list of needs. So through the process of having those conversations, when it comes down to the budget and they line everything out for us to consider, that we ended up hearing from 2 schools that had asked for intervention. And one was Branson, which they're able to get through Title I support. So that, you don't see that because it's being provided through Title I. Then it came down to Shepherdstown Middle School, and again, as Mr. Banks had stated, is that when you look down and you evaluate the needs and the list of priorities of positions that we're able to ask for and supply, then we were unable to do that because we needed to get that school counselor that was based on student numbers.
for special ed teachers, what is the caseload for elementary school special ed teachers? So are they case managers, or is there a position where someone is a case manager?
They are case managers, and it's going to vary from school to school as well.
So you have a case manager at every elementary school?
Every elementary school special education teacher manages the case. So there's not one person that does everything. Each teacher has a specific number of students. Usually they try to divide that up pretty evenly based off however many are in the building.
There's no set limit?
There is a set limit by the state, yes ma'am, and we do not exceed. It depends on the level of which the student is as to how many can go on their case.
I'm just wondering with these liaisons, how much of that is taken away from the caseload? Is it freeing up anything for these special ed teachers, or is it freeing up the coordinator or something?
It's freeing up 2 things as far as the teacher's concerned. Number one, it's free. We anticipate it's going to free up their before school and after school time that they are utilizing to get the paperwork done, because they will not take themselves away from the students when the students are in the building. And then number 2, we hope that it's going to free up the time that they are able to push into be with their students, so that they're not out scheduling meetings or ensuring that something has to get from one place to another as far as paperwork is concerned. So if you remember Mr. Walter talking about, the majority of his staff are there before him, and they stay 2 to 3 hours after him because they are trying to get everything done and meet all the timelines that they have to have.
I know you said it, but there is a coordinator at every elementary school, correct or not?
I can't use the word coordinator because coordinator signifies an extra stipend that we don't have. There is a teacher at every elementary school that is deemed to be the eternal special education god or goddess there that everybody goes to and talks to.
Right.
They do not oversee everybody though, like at a high school level, they do not do that.
They can't schedule IEP meetings.
They can, but when they start to do that for the other long-term subs that are in the building, then that's even more time that they're not meeting with their students either. So
Yeah, I forgot about the subs, so that makes it.
Yes, ma'am.
That's the problem.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm
Yes,
just
ma'am.
looking at, possibilities of interventionists, because
Yes,
that's
ma'am.
the one thing that was going to, really get to the root of
Yes, ma'am.
academics achievement.
Mr. Wink, real quick, do you have, is it Ms. Pengel that does middle school, Ms. Dingus that does elementary school as far as trying to kind
Ms.
of herd
Pangel does,
everybody,
Ms.
or
Pangel does pre-K.
Pre-K, okay.
Elementary schools are split between Ms. Horning and Ms. Pangel, and then secondary, middle school and high school is Ms. Fisher.
Okay, how about Ms. Dingus?
Ms. Dingus is pre-K.
Pre-K as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
okay.
And through our restructuring next, did I say something wrong? Oh, yes. Through our restructuring, we are actually, outside of this, we're actually looking at, Mrs. Dingus is going to take pre-K kindergarten because it offers more of that bump for them to have, for our parents and for our students to have that familiar face. So she'll actually be picking up pre-K and K, and then we'll take elementary like it was before. So that, we think that's going to be a nice move over. Outside of whatever happens with the budget, Mrs. Dingus is going to be doing that for us. So.
Mr. Banks, can I ask you a couple questions?
Sure.
Okay, so we talked about having 10 available at Washington. I know Jefferson has a bit of an increase in population. Do we know what their numbers are as far as how many teachers they have? How many math, how many social studies, how many whatever?
No, I don't have that with me, I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks, Amy. And the other question the question I have that I don't see on here, I'm gonna bring it up because it's important to me, is the business teacher.
Right.
So we still have a massive discrepancy between two high schools of, I think, 3 business teachers at Washington and 0 at Jefferson. So me personally, I don't know how we need to fix that. You can't enroll students if you don't have a teacher. So whether it is that one of those Washington teachers is going to utilize Smartboard or whatever we call it now, and teach that class, and we have a body at Jefferson to be able to facilitate those grades and whatever needs to happen. But I don't know how, it's kind of a catch-22. If we don't hire one, we're not gonna start the program. But yet if we don't start the program, we can't hire one, so.
It's my understanding that the previous teacher, who is now at Wildwood, is, there's talk with him, is what I was told, when I inquired about it.
Well, I mean, I know Wildwood has had anyway in the past. Miss Lewis used to be at Wildwood, had an extremely robust Wildwood program for business, and now she's at the high school at Washington. And then I know obviously Mr. Hunter was there. Now he's at Wildwood. So Wildwood I know still needs that. I just, I don't know what that plan needs to look like, but I think we need to address that somehow in the next few weeks. Again, schedules are gonna go out, we have nothing. But I don't think that's fair to students, and it's not gonna get ever started, and we're always gonna be in a position where we say, we don't have the funds for it.
It was
But
never fair to them in the beginning to take it away, I felt like.
But I think that, again, I get what we have, but I don't think we can have 3 at Washington and 0 at Jefferson and not address it. That to me would be a big thing.
I know it was, just like anything else, just with our own personal budgets, we have lists of things that, rise to the top. And I think early on it was on the list and seemed to be making its way through the list. And then as the budget started to come together, it was like, uh-oh. And then we've got this and this and this we need to pay for, and some of those things dropped off the list. But I think what you're asking is the ability of Jefferson students to virtually be part of a business program that Washington might already be offering. Is that
Well,
what
and I
you're
think
asking?
that's a fair way to start it,
Mhm.
right? I think if you have 3 staff members there who are trained in allowing kids to be Microsoft Excel certified, and all the different pieces that they have to have to move forward in life in today's
Right.
world. And if they don't even have the opportunity, I don't see how we can continue that. I mean, that, so I think that they're very well-seasoned, well-trained, excellent staff members there who have a lot of knowledge that they can impart. And I think it's a way to get that interest back together that's not going to be too overwhelming, but it will then lay the groundwork for them to be able to offer those classes, you know, on a full-time basis and get somebody in there who is also already certified in all those programs and can be able to move that forward, because I think it's extremely important.
I know also you do need to have a facilitator type person in the room when you have a scenario like that, so that would be an additional cost that you would have for that. But I'll certainly pass that on to Dr. Gibson and also work with Mary Beth on that.
Got all those pay increases for those administrative salaries, we could just put a freeze on that for a while.
Well, thank you very much for putting the assistant principals in here also. That's, I know it says on here a 5-year plan, but it's really a 5-year plan that's been stalled the past 2 years, so it really feels like a decade-long plan. And that's really, you know, forward thinking for our system to grow more elementary school principals.
I think the last 3 bullet points on your agenda, ELA science materials, grow your own, and summer registration, we have really kind of addressed those last 2. The one about ELA and science adoption, as you know, ELA was scheduled to be adopted last year. We put a pause on it and adopted it this year. It is always the most expensive adoption. We have been back and forth with the companies, seeing any possible way that we can save money without, you know, compromising what the teachers really want and need. And so we've been able to reduce it to $2.4 million. I also, just out of curiosity, was checking with surrounding districts to see if they were seeing the same type of costs associated with these adoptions, and they're very much so in line with what we're being asked to pay from those companies. So it's a challenge. Science is also a big adoption, but what we hope to do there is purchase science as part of the FY24 budget. That means that this year we will have adopted science but not purchased science. The benefit to waiting for science to purchase is that next year's adoption is foreign language, which is a very small adoption and doesn't have the big ticket like ELA or science would. Following year, just for reference, is math. So then you're back to another big ticket adoption. So that's the plan that Dr. Gibson and I have spoken about, and trying to match it up with the needs of our budget for this year.
Mr. Banks, is
Yes.
this the kind of thing that we would need to go into a 2-phase thing, like ELA, adopt elementary 1 year and secondary the next year, and then, I mean,
Yeah, we
I don't
talked
know.
about, we actually talked about trying to push science through for this year, just at the secondary level, and that model you just discussed, you know, leaving elementary out, but we just weren't able to do it. I think because we're behind a year on ELA adoption, it really best serves us to do all of it at this point, so that they have the most recent and up-to-date materials. So.
Well, depending on how we do math or what changes we need to make, that would end up being a phased-in approach anyway, because of the way that we don't want to screw up, you know, what kids are having to try to figure out. So there'll be a lot to talk about with that. With the ELA, have we looked at, or as well, just I'll put it back on the radar, to make sure that we have this summer opportunities for staff to be able to, you know, load those portals full of things, to create those training videos, making sure that all of those staff members, especially the ones that have already piloted that program, that they have imparted all knowledge that's easily accessible for everyone who's going to be having to do that for next year.
We have already done an extensive amount of training, and over the summer we'll have quite a few opportunities for that additionally. Plus, there are coffee chats right now where teachers can join in and learn more about CKLA from those teachers who've already had it for a year, and are very excited, enthusiastic about it. So that's been a great experience. We've also just recently trained our principals on that, because it's important for them to know what they're looking for when they go into a classroom.
Okay, yeah, I think it's important to, again, I don't mind us offering that as a summer, but if I was a teacher and I worked this year especially, I don't want to work this summer, and I know they do. I mean, they do. People say all the time, "Oh, you only work for 9 months." When I'm just like shake my head, like that's such an ignorant statement of anyone who actually knows a teacher. But the reality is, if they want some time to breathe and step back, they need to have that accessible to them, whether it's because all of those coffee chats are videotaped and then you can record every one of them, they can be watched on their own time, or that each one of those lessons can be, again, videotaped, have somebody, have them do the first quarter, and then you have a professional development day to be able to offer that whole taping of a second quarter, and then we were always ahead of that, but at least they have something to help them to not have to try to dig and sift through all that material when we know from the teachers who, you know, actually gave us testimony on it, that it is a lot of work. It's worth it, but it's a lot of work, and some of them will have the time to put in, and some of them won't, and so we're gonna get some extreme deficits in classrooms that I think we can avoid if we pre-plan for it.
Yeah, I think another really good thing is our positions are posted. So it's a great time to hire. And our elementary principals, as you go out in the schools, our interviews are set up to hire teachers right now. And it's great because if those positions are posted in June and July, it's very difficult. So hopefully, you know, we're going to be in a better position. And HR has been great about that this year. So.
Thank you.
All right, well, that's the last bullet point. I don't know if there's anything else that we wanted to say to wrap up things, but that is a draft budget given to you as the board for your review. I don't know that, maybe you talked about this, Katie, but the draft budget will be out on comment. And
Yes, so the
you
draft
can speak
budget,
to that.
we were required to put it in the paper to say that there's a budget available 10 days prior to the vote, which it went out last Wednesday, and the vote technically will take place on the 23rd, so we well exceeded that 10 days. And so any public comment, I know that they're going to put this video up so people can, if they want to, hop on, you know, the internet and check it out, see what we have proposed, all the different parts of it, give public comment, and then of course public comment will be given to the board prior to the board meeting on Monday. And so that's when it would be formally up to be adopted, or any changes or anything like that that comes forward from the board. And that means it'll be at 6:30. It'll be prior to the usual 7 o'clock start, like it always has been in the past.
Thank you.
A week from today.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Well, we appreciate all of you taking your time today to walk us through the details of all of the information you give us. It's greatly appreciated.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, 5:12. Meeting